Welcome back to the Bitcoin Reformation Podcast, where we are three pastors who love Jesus and, yes, Bitcoin too. But today you are back stuck with just David and I. We're missing our partner in crime, Ben. They're out doing the Lord's work as he so often is. And so for that, we'll just be with us two today. But let me start us off with what's going on in our lives. I was telling David a little bit about this before we started that last Sunday, so not this past one, or not 2 Sundays ago, just a couple days ago as we were recording this, we went up into the mountains. And so we had originally bought a tent to go to Zion with, but then they changed their stuff, and so they no longer do tenting at Jellystone, Yogi Bear, Zion. So anyway, we had this tent, and it was like, we need to use it. We need to take advantage of it. And the kids were asking, hey, I want to sleep in the tent with someone, with dad, etc. Right. And so David can kind of see where this is going. And so we did it and did worship in the morning here and got in the car and drove up the mountains. It was just crazy that within 45 minutes, I can be above 8,000 feet, and it's 70 degrees instead of 110, and it just big giant pine trees, and it just smells like nature. I mean, it's awesome. So we did that, went up there, set up camp, had an awesome time. Emily came up later with Judah and Silas. And we did s'mores. We had our dinner at the picnic table on the campsite. The kids were running around, throwing sticks, and Judah was trying to put everything into his mouth. It was like, it was a crazy, crazy time. But the only Silas and Zoe stayed the night in the tent. And I can honestly say, David, I think I slept worse than they did.
Oh, yeah.
It was crazy. So, I mean, we had brought like I have a battery pack type thing, like a box.
Sure.
Thing. And so I'd brought that along so then we could charge anything if I needed to, but then also use like our sound machine, because we are sound machine people in our house. So I cannot sleep without my sound machine on. And so we brought the whole thing. And I was like, this is going to be, I'll sleep in the middle. So then if the kids are like awake, they won't run into each other. And we went out, looked at the stars at like 8:45 because, in the mountains you can actually see them as opposed to down here in the city, you can't. And we went back in and they both fell asleep probably within half an hour at like 9:15. And my watch told me that night that I didn't fall asleep until 2 a.m. And then I slept until 5 when it was time to get up.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It was like, I don't know how I hiked the Appalachian Trail and actually slept in my tent and on the shelter floors, because I literally was just laying there like, all right, I'm ready to go to sleep.
You didn't have other people to worry about in the same way as children, and you probably like righteously exhausted by the end of any given day on the trail, I'm going to guess.
Oh, absolutely. So it was I was amazed how well they slept. It was also funny. So it was like 56 the night when we were up there.
Yeah.
And so, that's like on the verge of cold, at least for people who are used to, we cool our house to 75 at night. So that's cold. But the kids, again, they're not used to a tent. And so we had a little pad, the one that Emily used when she was hiking. And then we had another, just a thin foam thing. And neither of them, as I'm laying there until 2 a.m., are sleeping on their pad. And so like multiple times I'm like trying to like cover them back up or like kind of like pick them up and put like, come on, kid, you're sleeping on the hard rocks of the like tent pad on the ground. But they slept.
Oh, yeah.
And kids are just amazing that way. So it was awesome. I'll have to send you, David. I like made a 15-minute video of our time together.
Nice.
Up there. And it was so good to like be out of your normal context. I was out of, I had satellite reception on my phone, but mostly disconnected from all the rest of the world, and be with your family or kids in the world that God has made in that way is, there's a special amount of like soul refreshing, soul filling that happens in those moments. I told, last thing, and then I'll throw it to you. I told somebody that I understand now why people don't go to worship on the weekend. when they can just go hiking
Yeah.
and spend time in nature. Like, it is so good to be that way and to be out that way in nature. But it's also like, I'm sure if I did that every weekend, then I would feel like I was missing
Sure.
those good gifts that God gives to me. But just being outside in that way was so awesome. Absolutely loved it. So, what's going on in your life, in your world?
What's going on? What? Shoot, you had triggered something else with me with your kids. Well, keep enjoying it. Oh, I think I was gonna say this, that you're on the greater Mount Charleston Mountains. Is that where you were?
Yeah, the Spring Mountains, I think, is technically what the range
Okay.
is called that we were at.
I think I've told you, but in case I haven't, when it's winter time here and I'm on the east end of the valley, just 2 miles from here, hiking the PCT, if it's been cold enough and cool enough out in the Mojave overnight, I can see snow-capped Mount Charleston to the east
Still
northeast.
crazy.
It blows my mind as a Midwesterner growing up, to be able to see over 100 miles away just boggles my mind. And then similarly, I can look northeast and see a even sharper white cap peak, and that's Mount Telescope in still in San Bernardino County, which is wild to me as well, but it's up in Death Valley. I think I've said this before too. Our San Bernardino County is the largest county in the entire nation, and it is the size of West Virginia. So there you go. Pretty big place.
It's nuts.
Pretty big place. Well, great. Yeah, our family's good. Jed is still finishing out his summer at Camp Arcadia. Much of the staff has left. He's there through September 14 and then flying home. We'll be excited to see him. Megan and I were able to see him up in Michigan about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and that was really nice. At camp, they have a canteen every night where you can go get ice cream, candy, popcorn. You can buy shirts and stuff, and it was fun. We got ice cream 2 nights in a row, and we put it on his tab, and that was delicious. That was even more delicious than the ice cream itself, is what I'm going to
That's
say.
great.
And he was like, he was
He's
essentially
proud, I'm
to do
sure.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was fun. Took Levi last Thursday then off to Grand Canyon University in Phoenix. The locals were saying at least it's not hot, and it was like high 90s. But that doesn't qualify as hot yet for all of you living truly in the desert. He's doing really well, an RA at Grand Canyon, so he's there ahead of most of the students, but queuing up for his junior year. And then we've got the high schoolers back at it here. Home football game tonight, I think we're going to. The weather's beautiful. We had monsoon like rains yesterday afternoon, a pop-up thunderstorm, and it did seem to be a lot of strikes, but we lost power for about 5 hours, which just seems so common here.
Wow. 5 hours?
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I can tell you this. Our electrical bill has gone up a lot in past years because they've been hardening the grid. But boy, for all that we've put into it, it still seems relatively fragile here on top of a mountain. But that gave us a chance to go on a long walk and grill out some meat. Quick, grab the meat out of the refrigerator at the beginning of it and have a grill. So we were fine. And I'm glad to be with you today. I think our friend Ben has been in, maybe is still in Germany. So we'll have to catch up with him when he gets back. I think he was headed off for a solid 2 weeks or something like that. But here we are today. And I think the topic of the day is talking about money from more of a biblical perspective. This is a topic that you can readily find resources on. You could readily look things up, whether in, cross-referencing and in accordance in your Bible, back of Bible, or with a standalone accordance, of course, with research tools today. You can get a lot. I'd seen a post recently, and then I even put out on X, I think of all the biblical sins on money, Jared, that we all think of, the one that comes to mind most readily is that the love of money is a root of all evil. So the love of money, and then I think there's a constellation of other ones that go along with it: covetousness, right, and greed, these types of things. But the one I was thinking of at that moment that we pay less attention to, and we'll eventually get to today, was in the area of unequal weights and measures. Unequal weights and measures. We thought we were maybe going to do a different topic. We'll be coming around to that in coming weeks. So I'll introduce a word if our listeners don't know it. The word is entropy. So just put a bookmark in that, or put a pin on it up on the cork board, something like that. But a few things happened this week, as you and I talked about beforehand, Jared. But we'll share with our listeners. First of all, as we record today on a Friday, the price of Bitcoin is up to $77,000, and that's up, I think, some $10,000 to $12,000 in just 3 days. It's been a huge leg up after about 75, 80 days of just boring sideways action. 65, 66, down to 62, 61, 60. But in these low mid 60s, suddenly it's taking a big jump. Bitcoin has. But then in the same week, we crossed over $40 trillion as a nation. So suddenly, it's not just us Bitcoin guys or us family to family as we think of paycheck in, bills spent out. It's not just money on the mind in these sorts of ways, but suddenly on the national mind a little bit, $40 trillion. I don't know if you heard that. We crossed over. But money is on the mind. And so why not talk about that, but maybe approach it then in terms of some of the biblical categories of money is a tool. Tools are not inherently bad, typically. They're a little bit indifferent, but tools are in the hands of people, and we people are sinners, Jared. And so,
Amen.
Not only do we invent the tools, but we invent ways. We invent ways to misuse those tools. It is said that John Calvin once said, "The heart of sinful man is an idol-making factory," and I actually checked with a Reformed friend about that. I was like, wait a second. John Calvin was half a generation younger than Luther. He's pre-industrial revolution, both of them. Industrial revolution in the 1700s, or these reformers in the 1500s. What's this factory talk? And the actual translation goes something like this: the heart of sinful man is a idol-making forge. So we have to think of the blacksmith shop, and the blacksmith maybe pounding out hundreds of cut nails or hundreds of horseshoes. Even in the blacksmith shop, there were widgets coming out of the places, right? Repeat over and over and over again. The heart of sinful man is an idol-making forge. Tools are somewhat indifferent. Oftentimes, tools are invented to be positive and good, but in the hands of sinful men, we find ways to even misuse our tools. So let's talk about money. Let's talk about $40 trillion, and then let's get into the biblical account a bit, Jared. What do you think of, Jared, when you hear that we've crossed over 40 trillion in national debt?
Right. So I was going to say that 40 trillion number is the national debt. And I mean, on one hand, I think the number for our ears, because we hear that number now somewhat regularly, is somewhat has been desensitized, right?
Yeah.
So I remember when I was growing up, the show, I think it was with Regis Philbin. Is that how you say the guy's name?
Phil Bin for you youngsters.
Phil Bin. There you go.
Regis
right. So
Kathy Lee.
Right. So Regis was on the show Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? At least that's who I remember used to host that.
Yeah.
And, shows like Survivor, when they were new, not, Survivor's still around. It was like $1 million prize. Like that was
right.
Wow, I can't believe, this person is going to have $1 million. And I always thought that was a lot of money, and it is. But it's really hard for our brains to comprehend, understand, grasp the difference between a million, a billion, and a trillion. So I don't know if you have that analogy handy,
I do.
David.
I do.
So if you would give us again help us understand what is 1 trillion, and then multiply that by 40. What does 40 trillion even mean?
Right. So we'll do it in seconds. Let's think in terms of time. 1 million seconds ago was a little over 11 days ago. You're like, oh, wow. Even 11 days ago, I'm thinking particularly of your daughter, Jared. she's old enough that you could say, hey, do you remember such and such? And she'd say, yes. And you'd say, that was 11 days ago. And she said, I remember. So even your daughter, how old is she now? Is she 5?
She's 5. Yep.
Yeah, that's what I thought. A 5-year-old can grasp 11 years, right? That's a million. I'm sorry, 11 days. That's a million seconds. A billion seconds is 31 years ago. Well, the two of us can grasp 31 years ago. Not a single one of our children. What do we got? 7 children across the two of us, and throwing some hop kids. Not a single one of them has lived long enough to say, I've lived 31 years. I now know what that first chunk of 31 years is like. Personally, well, I'm like you, Jared.
I can't remember 31 years ago. I'll
How
tell
old
you
are
that.
you? Are you 31 now? Are you 30? How old
So
are you?
I'm 33.
Okay, there
So
you
I
go.
can't
That's right.
remember being 2.
But it may be a memory. Maybe there's some like feeling of a memory. You're close. You're close though to having 31 years being a part of your.
I've at least been alive for that long.
Yeah, you have, right? And I'm working on my second set of 31, and I'm pretty far advanced. We're making strides here, and it's humbling me. But get this. So that's a billion, 31 years. A trillion though. 31,000 years ago, Jared. 31,000 years. And we've got 40 of these. In terms,
Right.
if a dollar is spent every second, just trying to grasp that. And I think that illustration does quick work of what you were just saying. Our brains can record numbers, but what's actually taking place as those numbers grow is largely beyond our imagination or our lived experience. Then they just become kind of empty numbers that we throw around without attaching to them the gravity that is due to them, right? 11 days versus 31 years versus 31,000 years. Those are wild jumps. Those are absolutely wild jumps. How about this? Jared, I looked this up this last week. I happen to just remember. I don't even have notes down on this. Are you aware of what year it was when we first crossed our first $1 trillion of debt as a nation? Yeah, it was founded in 1776, right? That's our common number there. It was 1981. Inside my lifetime, before your lifetime, 1981. That's like 200. That's 204 or 5 years after the founding of our nation. 204 years for the first 1,000. I'm sorry, for the first trillion, right? Mm-hmm. And now from 81 till now, however many years that is, not so many. 40 years, a little 45. Over 40 years. Yeah, we've added 45. You're exactly right. 45. We've added 39 trillion more, and this last trillion came at us in a little over 100 days.
Yeah, it's crazy.
With this debt, just like if we have debt on our own credit cards at home, we pay interest on that debt. We're trying to pay the principal, but we at least have to pay the interest. Our national interest is $3.8 billion a day. And I divided that by 330 million Americans. I've heard that at some point. It's probably more now. But that comes down to just around $11 per day per citizen. So a little over $300 a month per citizen, just to pay the interest on the debt. Yeah, these are big numbers, and it's not a nothing burger, right? We treat it like it's a nothing burger maybe at time, but it's not a nothing burger. And I don't mean to catastrophize this topic or catastrophize the world, because we, of all people, live as people of hope, right? That God sent his son our way, that he gave his perfect life for us and for all. He took it up again. And this is our hope. This is the hope for all the world. So I don't mean to, on the one hand, overly catastrophize this. On the other hand, it's not good. And you get the sense that a lot of people are asleep at the wheel. Would you agree with that?
Well, so I think when you said it's not good, that's the thing I don't think we think much about, right? So it's not even just that people are asleep at the wheel. It's sort of I don't understand why this is a problem.
Right.
And, even for someone who's lived in the Bitcoin world for a while now, like I still don't feel like I can fully grasp why this is such a big deal. Like I can get it in my own life. Like, hey, you can't be in debt over your head. But because of, I think, what we're going to talk about maybe a little bit later, that for a nation, for a country, it's almost like, yeah, this is probably okay, right? This is good. Like, you can have trillions of dollars in debt because, like, why not? It seems to be what
Yeah.
everyone has. So, like, even from the perspective of to say it's not good, I don't feel like I could probably do a very good job of even explaining to people why it's not good, or why we shouldn't just say, yeah, we should do something about this, or yeah, we should actually try and fix this, or yeah, this isn't the way it should be.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do. I totally agree with you. I talked with a gentleman whose whole life is and has been in finance. He is pushing 70. He told me that with this debt, and the problem of the debt has been a problem since he graduated college. The sky is falling, they told him when he was a young man graduating from college. And he said, David, I haven't felt it to this day. It's never materialized. So either we haven't been paying attention and I hear something about it, but I don't feel any different, or here's a gentleman whose whole life was predicated on this industry. And he's saying, I heard all the kind of doomsdayers, the polar caps are melting. We got 2 years, and now it's
That's
25
right.
years
Florida's
later.
going to disappear.
Right. We tend to become desensitized, and call it a nothing burger. Yeah. But at the same time, Jared, I do get this sense suddenly the financial strain of the markets is hitting Main Street to where people are feeling more and more stressed. Stressed at the grocery store, just stressed paying for the bills in life. I do get a sense of that. So I think people will be and or are already feeling some of the negative fruits of this, even if they don't know the cause of it yet.
Well, I think part of that is the sense that what's the phrase? You can be early or you can be right, or something like that. You can't be both. And so even if you're right that there is a problem and it's going to cause effects, it's very hard to know when that will actually manifest itself. Like, it's not as easy as saying, well, because our national debt has reached this point, then this very thing is going to happen tomorrow. That
Right.
type of thing. And
Right.
so it is. I don't think anyone would necessarily disagree that it's a problem, and there is things that are happening, and then someday it will have to be dealt with or managed, or we'll have to do something because of especially how much it's growing at the pace. But it's more of a when and what exactly, how is that going to manifest it, that kind of becomes the difficult thing to wrestle with.
And the thesis that we've laid out in the past that I think we still stand by is that the government, so the government's going to try and work their way out of this with money printing, which goes by any number of names. There's any number of mechanisms by which it happens. We come up with great idioms to call it this thing when really it's something a little bit more straightforward, money printing. But that will happen. If they introduce more liquidity or money into the system, people have more money in their hands, they spend more money, more taxes are collected. The problem is there just tends to never be any fiscal restraint in terms of the budget and spending. And so we become, and I think one of our guests, who was it? Was it Jake? Talked about that. There's that old ancient bracelet of like a snake bracelet where the mouth of the snake on the bracelet is connected back through on its own tail. There's a name for that. I should learn that. But we become a system where we end up kind of eating ourselves. The government, to try and get their way out of it, introduces more liquidity. That liquidity doesn't come first to people like us, or the people we serve in our day-to-day life are in your congregation or in the congregation that I'm a part of. We're somewhere down the line. And so that liquidity ends up working its way down to us in terms of inflated prices. Things cost more, but my paycheck is not bigger, this type of thing. So it is going to be happening. There are consequences, right? How about that? We know that there's this moment in our children's lives as well where they're not as convinced that there's consequences like we're telling them, right?
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't matter. We still discipline them. And sometimes we become a little bit more patient as parents and say, I don't want for my child to make that choice. I don't want for them to feel the consequences, but I do know this, Lord willing, I will be around on the day they do suffer the consequences, right? And I'll be there hopefully to pick them up, to clean their wounds, to talk them through it, this type of thing. That's one of the terrible parts of parenting. I'm probably
Yeah, but that's
describing. Go
that's
ahead.
like the story of the prodigal son, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in a nutshell, it's the father who lets his son go, knowing it's a bad decision, but is there to run and welcome him home with open arms after he's failed and fallen miserably. And that's a picture
Yeah.
of our heavenly Father's love for us too. So
Yeah. So that's our thesis, is that debt is increasing, and that then fixed assets with fixed supplies or low supplies of the new asset or commodity will do well in such an environment. And Bitcoin is like those things and unlike those things, like it in that the new Bitcoin coming to on the market is a low supply. There's less of the whole of the Bitcoin. There's less of it flowing in each year from the mining rewards than there is even of gold to the market. So the supply of it's less inflationary than gold. The other thing about Bitcoin is it has a terminal supply of 21 million. And that mining reward, as we've talked about in the past, gets halved every 4 years. So it's trending towards zero and towards the terminal supply of 21 million sometime more than 100 years from now. So this week, yeah, $40 trillion in debt, Jared, and suddenly the price of Bitcoin is jumping. And it's probably for 1,000 reasons, and yet it is not detached from the reason of, in moments when the largesse of governments is taking place and people see that that's going to potentially hurt you, they reach for scarce things. They reach for scarce things and park their money there. And to our thesis, our way of thinking, there's nothing more scarce, beautifully scarce than Bitcoin. So there you go. All that said, though, Jared, the goal, I think, of the rest of our time then is to say, how does this fit with biblical categories, right? How does the Bible talk about money? Yeah, so how does the Bible talk about it? So here's a list quickly of several biblical sins surrounding money. I think, even though I'll read through some of them, you'll begin seeing that that many of them kind of hold together in groupings. For instance, the first one is greed and covetousness. This is spoken against in the Old Testament and the New. Um, Even Jesus himself, Luke 12, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. All right. That's related to the next one, love of money. Not money itself, but the love of money is called a root of all evil, 1 Timothy 6. Next one, serving wealth over God, right? You cannot serve both God and money, Matthew 6. And I think of this is kind of the framing of the commandments in Luther's Small Catechism. Luther doesn't say you shouldn't make use of other things, you shouldn't have trust in them, because anytime you reach for a tool because you think it's going to help you is a form of trust. But Luther's able to frame each one like this: we should fear, love, and trust in God above all those things, right? Above all those
mhm.
things. So in that first slot and second place, I'm sure even in Luther's thinking, is always a distant second, right? There's this huge leap from first, fear, love, and trust in God above all other things. Uh, theft, you shall not steal. Speaking of the commandments, Exodus 20. This next one, I'm going to just highlight it and then we're going to keep going because we're going to come back to it. Dishonesty in business, using false weights and measures, or rigged scales. So, yeah, that used to happen really at you go to the market, right? I don't I don't typically go to the market, Jared, and worry about false weights and measures. I don't know. Do you?
Well,
I-
so I think there is. I had an experience about this.
okay.
It's
Yeah,
not
go for it.
necessarily false weights or measures. It's more of a labeling. So I don't know if you saw this. There is a post going around on X that university had done a study on
Uh,
the
avocado oils.
authenticity of
Yeah.
avocado oils. Yeah. And so, like, we're trying. I'm one of those crazy people who thinks
Yep.
seed oil is not very good for you, inflammatory, etc. And so we try and buy things like avocado oil. And so we buy Ciate chips, we buy the Jackson's brand sweet potato chips, the
I love
Boulder brand
those.
yeah, they're all great and they all say avocado oil. But this whole study said, hey, basically none of these pass the test for authentic avocado oil, which likely means they're mixing some other oil. They didn't really
Yep.
quite say what with them. And so as a consumer, you're like, what? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to trust that this ingredient says
Yep.
avocado oil, potatoes, salt, when really it's avocado oil plus something? And
Hmm.
so it might not be like a unfair gain or unfair measure, but it's a misleading and
Yeah.
untrue representation of ingredients. And so
Right.
you feel that same level of like, well, I guess I need to start making my own food now at home because I can't trust that the companies that are telling me that's what's in my food is actually in my food at all. And so that was a super like, you're kidding, right? Like this is a joke. Like this can't actually be the truth. It was
Yeah.
very disorienting.
Hellman's. That's the brand out east. I forget what it is out here in the west. Best Foods maybe, but Hellman's mayonnaise. They have a green top
Yep.
mayonnaise. The problem is if you actually look on their list of ingredients, they're actually a little bit more honest and dishonest. Honest. I don't know. It says no olive oil. Mayonnaise, I think, is what theirs is. They probably
Mm-hmm.
have an avocado as well. Olive oil. But you go on the list of ingredients. Is olive oil in there? Yes, but it is a lesser ingredient than the canola oil above it, so they've for a while I was reaching for that thinking, oh, I've skipped the canola oil, but now you're talking about some other brands which say 100% avocado oil, and it turns out to not be true. The same that grift, I think back in time 10 even 20 years ago, this has gone around similarly about honey. Is
Mm.
honey really honey that you buy in the supermarket, or is it sugar water, right? All these things. Yeah, these are examples of dishonest measures. Yeah, and so apparently in biblical times, the buyers and sellers in the market would use two sets of weights. Even some of the biblical texts refer to this. So if I'm and both are supposed to be the same. Oh, let me grab my weights from under the table, right? And so when I'm buying from you, I think it's lightweights, so that I get a better price. And when I'm selling, or when I forget which way. I'm not grokking it in my mind right now exactly right, but you use the different weights to your advantage when buying and selling. And God says He hates this. He hates this. So dishonesty in business, fraud and deceit, of course, usury. That's a whole other topic. We should talk about that sometime. But that's lending at interest, withholding and delaying a worker's wages, bribery, flat out extortion and oppression of the poor, hoarding wealth. Jesus talks about this in the parable of the rich fool, neglecting the poor, lacking generosity, robbing God. One reference that came up was Malachi 3, withholding tithes and offerings from the Lord. But I can think of the book of Acts as well, Ananias and Sapphira. There's quite a story there. And then Simony, which, I've heard that name and I've read Acts plenty of times, and I never realized that that's named after Simon Magnus in Acts chapter 8, who tried attempting to buy spiritual power or office. That's Simony. That's really an interesting one to me. But the two that come to mind, the one covers like the love of money is a root of evil. A lot of those individual ones fall underneath that. And then in the Old Testament, more than the New, I think, more than the New, but is in the Old Testament particularly is that, which one was it there? The idea of dishonest weights and measures, or a dishonest product as well. I am curious. I did not go back through and look at when Jesus clears the temple. He hates that the temple has become a marketplace, but I think it's not a fair marketplace either, right? So there's tones of that in those stories in the Gospels. But here's what I came to the conclusion of, Jared. Largely, I agree with you. I don't. When we go to the local grocery store, I don't worry about. I should. Every once in a while, you catch a price that's not right, and you might go fix it. But I don't. I don't walk into the grocery store thinking, particularly, that the local grocer is hostile towards me, the consumer. There's a lot of consumer protections there. We got to get down to individual foods and what's in it. That's a active conversation in the United States, and God bless that conversation. That should be true. I've been told before, where should you shop in the grocery store? And somebody said, all the outside walls. That's where the fresh stuff is.
There you
It's
go.
in the middle of the store, the highly processed. That's where you need to maybe pay attention. But I don't typically go. I go because it's a helpful place to me. I don't typically think as I'm walking in from the parking lot, here we go, I'm going into the lion's den. I better watch my back, right? There's a lot of consumer protections that have been put in place. I'm sure there's many more that still need to be put in place. But there's a lot of consumer protection there. But this idea of unequal weights and measures, Jared, I think is just as big now as it was in biblical times. We have just shifted it. It's shifted largely from us and the seller, or the seller and the consumer. And this concerned, though, that normal people are being oppressed by unequal weights and measures, I think that concern is still there, but the sin lies more corporately at the hands of government. And just come out and say it. I find the money printing that our government does and governments around the world do to be absolutely gross. I consider it to be theft. It is a putting of, a finger or a fat thumb on the scales and it benefits the government. And if it's benefiting them, it's helping them not deal with hard issues. It's helping them. I'm not saying everybody went to go be a part of the government to abuse, but it creates a system of abuse that's easy to participate in. And it hurts individuals. It just absolutely hurts individuals. And so I'm drawn to talking about this today, this idea of unequal weights and measures being a sin, not only in the Old Testament, through to this day. Where do we find it happening at its worst? I think it's happening at its worst in terms of governments. It hurts real people. And then I'll say this last part and hand it over to you, Jared. And I think because of that, it is a very pastoral concern, or should be. And when I say a pastoral concern, do I speak of a concern for pastors? Yes. But I also speak a little bit more generally about a pastoral concern for anybody who shepherds other people, anybody who cares for other people. That means moms and dads. That means us. Anytime we have neighbors or brothers and sisters, moms and dads that we're caring for, family, friends, it's a very pastoral human concern, but one that maybe we haven't been concerned about enough. What do you think about that, Jared?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is the Cantillon effect, I think is how you normally say that. And so you talk about it benefits the government, but the Cantillon effect says, hey, it benefits the people who are closest to that, right? The closest to the money printer. So it's not just even, the government itself, but it's also those people who are closest to that. And so that would be things like banks and or larger corporations, things like that. And the people who are furthest away from that spigot, if you will, you and I don't receive as much of the benefit of that pressing down on the scale. And so when it comes to the pastoral side of that, it's one that you don't, again, I think you're right to say we don't think about it often, because I'm more concerned usually about, hey, this person's sick, or this person is in the hospital, or they just lost their mom, et cetera, et cetera. But it's you cannot ignore the fact that we live in a world and a society that functions around the exchange of goods and services with a measure that in our world is called the United States dollar. And so that affects people in both their ability to live, their generosity, their hope, their concern for the future. And so when you think about that side of this issue, it takes, I think, on a more personal perspective, if you will, instead of just like, well, I'm concerned that my people have money in their bank account, right? No, okay, maybe. But it's more of a, I'm concerned what those unjust, unfair scales are doing to their heart, mind, body, soul, spirit. Because as they experience the, oh my goodness, I just can't do it anymore, or I can't do this, I can't buy the same thing I used to, I can't give in the same way that I used to. Now perhaps their heart, mind, body, soul, spirit is being led to maybe feel guilty, right? Maybe they feel ashamed that they can't fill in the blank. They can't participate in this ministry, whatever. And now they feel like they're a lesser Christian, a lesser follower of Jesus. And so the pastoral side, for me at least, when it comes to that kind of thing, is how is it going to drive people's faith, if you will, to trust and worry about things that they wouldn't have had to worry about as much if there wasn't those unjust scales in the world. And so then that makes it a, hey, this isn't just about numbers, it's about the people and what this thing is doing in their life to actually cause them to, worry about things that they wouldn't have to worry about. If it's easy, as you've said it before, if it's easy for some people to click some numbers on a key to change the amount in their account, if you will, but it's not for us, that creates a certain level of angst, if you will, a certain level of, oh my goodness, I can't keep up, that then we deal with as pastors, as people who care for those who want to do things but can't because of the world, the system that they live in. So I don't know if that's what you're going for.
No,
but that's how I hear
great.
that.
I love the Cantillon. I've heard it both ways. Cantillon effect. I've heard of Cantillionaires. People are having fun making this. But check this out. I looked it up. It is said that in the top 5 richest counties in the United States by median household income, okay, of the top 5, 3 of those 5 are the 3 counties that surround Washington, D.C.
Interesting. I did not know that.
Oh, yeah. So
I would have thought they're all in like California.
The next 2 are in California. Yes, the next 2. But then, so you say California, I would have thought of that. Silicon Valley folks, other folks. How do we get then the other 3 all from one state? Answer, they surround. Those 3 counties surround Washington, D.C. So when we say Cantillon effect, that those closest to the money spigot benefit the most, I think literally that is a good, maybe not full demonstration, but it should perk our interest and say, wow, there might be something to that. Let me study that some more, right?
Well, but then there's also like so many. I feel like this was more a thing when in the Obama era that people were complaining and bemoaning the amount of poor and people who were unhoused and things like that around DC itself too. That it was like this, hey, look at there's people who are suffering so much in our nation's capital, where all of these people with that same amount of wealth too.
So these are the counties surrounding DC and not District of Columbia.
Oh,
itself.
Gotcha. Sure.
Yes, which is very urban poor, right? Urban poor, crime ridden. I think in recent years under this administration, they've tried pushing back against that and had some success, right? But I had a brother, my brother-in-law worked, quote unquote, at the Pentagon. He was some days at the Pentagon for one portion of a stint. He was working in some of the Pentagon offices that were not actually attached anymore at the Pentagon. But even though he worked, quote unquote, at the Pentagon, which actually might be in Virginia and not in DC, I forget. But nevertheless, they were like so many other federal workers, right? He commuted in, right? So it's that, central power, the urban setting, but then those counties surrounding it in Virginia do really, really, really well. Why? Because they are literally closest to the money printers and where the decisions are made. That should tell us, give a lot of credence to this idea of the Cantillon effect. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. There's this concern. What does that mean for other people? If they're slowly, I have this, I think this is true of it. There's all kinds of people, Jared, then being slowly hurt by this, and they just don't even know it. It's part of the general, for them, malaise of life, right? There's some other fun names for that I can't think of right now, but they're just the sense that
It's like
things aren't
amnesia
good.
in some ways.
Amnesia, right? I think of amnesia. Now, if we kind of go down through the generations, I was talking with my mom about this because we were talking about my son getting out of college. And she said, yeah, but David, when Dad and I first got a house, our first mortgage rate, I forget if she said 15 or 17, but those were both interest rates in the 70s. And I said, you're right, Mom. And that couldn't have been fun. However, your mortgage payment, the average mortgage payment in the 70s, even with that higher interest, the average house, how about we just value it that way, was 4 times a new worker's salary. And now, with my son coming out, the average home is 9 to 11 times the average new worker's salary. So it's true, our mortgage rates are only 7 and not 15, but the mortgage itself, before we can even talk about interest rates, is so outsized compared to what they're doing. And that's a concern. I think it leads to, and I could bring this in as well, some nihilism amongst the young people. I could ask my kid and his friends, or my kids and their friends, are you nihilists? And they'd say no. But then if I would poll them on some individual topics, I would find out that their hope for being homeowners, the hope of many of them of being married and having kids, if I'd ask questions of individual ones, do you aspire to this? Or do you think it's within reach? I think we would find the sentiment suggests that they have nihilism that's kind of been worked into their mix. Or another piece that I can add about Gen Z and, is it Gen Z and Y? Are they calling them Y? What are we calling them anymore, Jared? Come on,
Like
Jared.
after Gen Z?
Yeah,
Like
after Gen millennials.
It's not Alpha, because I think that's the one above
I
Gen
can
Z.
look it up. But
I mean,
get this, the sports betting is going big. It is biggest with our youngest people. Which suggests to me that that also, I think, is a demonstration of some of the nihilism that's gotten down into their flesh and bones, right? It's one of two things. Either, yeah, I might lose, but it's fun. What do I care? So there's a little bit of, that's one form of nihilism. Another form of nihilism says, actually, I want to have a home and stuff someday, but for me to do that, I've got to go so far out on the risk curve. I've got to become a bettor and hope that I'm maybe one of the few to hit it big, so to speak, right? So that I can then have hope. One's sort of a hopeful nihilism, looking for a way out. One's more of a resigned nihilism, which might be a little bit redundant, but you get what I'm saying,
yeah, absolutely. And I think the frame too to look at it would be, in the Old Testament, God talks about visiting the sins from the fathers on the children's to the children's children. And it's not a funny thing, but like the idea of we struggle with the same things our parents do. Yeah. Right? The language of you are your parents maybe once removed. That you were shaped by them and formed by them for better or for worse. And so even the idea that, sin, yes, we've been forgiven by Jesus. Yes, they've been washed as white as snow. There's still this idea of consequence in the world. Right? There is still the idea of sin does not go without damage and destruction. And so when we're thinking about the Cantillon effect, the Cantillon effect, whatever, like there is still destruction that happens in the wake of that. And so one of them is nihilism, and a word I would attach alongside of that would be apathy to a indifference to financial, indifference to the debt. I don't care. It doesn't matter. And so then that consequence of that sin of the being unjust in your weight produces effects in people that, and we would say, are destructive, right? To gamble in that way, it is not looking to God to provide for you, is not looking and trusting him to give you what you need for your daily bread. And yes, of course, you're playing an active role in that. But I think it's where we can also say there is a part in which you're acting from the sin that's been done to you, and you're just perpetrating that sin in a
Yep.
different way as you live it out too.
Yeah, I was smiling so much in a way. There's a pastor that you and I have talked about. I'm not going to name him here, but he's on X, he's on Twitter. He's been generally negative towards Bitcoin and specifically negative towards Bitcoin. This is somebody I've known all the way back from my high school days, actually. And so I've tried having conversation with him. We've maybe made some strides, not just me strides with him, but us together, right? So I'll put it in a positive light. But the last thing I shared with him some of the stuff about housing prices, um, houses priced in gold from 1971 till now. It's stacked against the young people. He asked, then I shared with him that I thought was pretty self-evident about Gen Z growing in their gambling. So of gambling on the whole is growing in America. But of that growth, the majority of it is in our youngest people, right? Maybe those who can least afford to be gambling. But he said, explain, please. And I waited a day or two because I was like, if you invite me to explain and give me a blank check, sometimes I'll give you a sermon, right?
There you go.
Or
You
you can
send him a
try,
Google Doc that's 10
right,
pages long.
try to go to the other end and do something incredibly quippy. But this is what I ended up saying. I said, the fiat sins of the fathers are coming down on the heads of our nation's children. Yeah.
There you go.
Gen Z, for whom the financial world is stacked against, are turning to gambling out of some combination. It's exactly what we talked about, of pure nihilism or, a little bit of hope in the face of what feels like, doom to them or non-starters. Yeah. So I think all this is very real. So for me, suddenly this Old Testament category of unequal weights and measures, Jared, it's suddenly looking kind of pretty vibrant to me. It's in living color because it hasn't gone away. And how, by the way, what amazing, like, sort of hubris on my part, or what did C.S. Lewis call it? He called it chronological snobbery. Thank God we in our age don't deal with the things that our forebears dealt with. You know, it turns out it's there. It turns out it's there. I mean, and by the way, unequal weights and measures. I suffer from that sin in my home. When Megan's like, "Hey, can you scoop us both some ice cream?" And then I scoop us both some ice cream, and I have to say, well, I weigh a little bit more than Megan, or quite a bit more. I should probably take the bowl that has a little bit more in it than Megan's, right? So, I'm not like giving her pure choice. Which one would you like, baby? You know? So in small and large ways, I'm sure I myself also fall to that sin. But so much of sin and so much of the Christian life, Jared, is hyper individualized, right? And not rightly so. But when it comes to this unequal weights and measures, I think that's another interesting part of it. The concern was a corporate concern. The concern was one of the community of buyers and the community of sellers, the community of citizens and the community of those who, roughly speaking, have power to either serve or to rule over. Yeah. And so, by the way, as I looked through this, did more research on these Old Testament sins, I mean, money comes up, and the concerns of money and the abuse of money more than I think I've given credit to, Jared, which means, again, I'm saying to myself, we're told in the New Testament, the love of money is a root of all evil. I think I've almost every once in a while taken that, Jared, as paying too much attention to money is a root of all is love, and therefore is a
If
root
you
of all
talk
evil.
about it, that's evil.
Yeah,
Or
right,
if you even
right.
mention it, it means that you're a greedy fool.
Right. No. I, on the whole, man, maybe I'd love it for me, for pastors, for Christ's church to have more time to talk about money. I mean, we could talk incorrectly. We could say incorrect things about it. We could not follow God's word. We could talk about it too much in the wrong ways and believe the wrong things. Um, but I think we have room to actually pay more attention to it, because in each of these cases, God is looking to protect his people from abuse at the hands of other people. And money is such an area of everyday life. It's sort of like the air around us. We think of it as being all around. We deal with it in our household all the time, but somehow it becomes kind of forbidden and taboo for the church to talk about it. But anyways, I'll come up for air. I think I've been driving this almost maybe a little too much. What do you think? I guess
No,
we're
you're
at
good.
55 minutes into recording. This is typically when we start looking for an end. Let's begin wrapping things up. What do we
So
have to say
I
about
think
this?
the thing I would say here is the way in which our engagement with money reveals our heart, and so you can take that a number of ways. You could say, "Hey, show me your credit card statement and your bank account, and I'll tell you what you love." You could say, the way in which you talk about money reveals what you trust or how you trust in something, someone, whether that's money or something else. The reaction you have when someone says or asks you for money, or the way in which your church might ask you to give an offering, reveals something about your heart. So a brief story, our board of directors is reading the book Sticky Teams.
Oh, yeah.
It's about sort of like board, congregation, leadership. How do we work together? And there's a great chapter in there about money, and he makes some funny and yet convincing points that he doesn't understand why a pastor who is there for you in the darkest of moments, who knows your secrets and your sins that you wrestle with that no one else knows, can't know about how much money you give to the church. He talks about how he tells a story, I'm assuming is true, that their church was building something and they were using non-union workers, non-union construction people. And so this family was a pro-union family, whatever. And so they wrote a letter to them saying, hey, we are not going to be sending our first fruit offerings to your church until you begin using union workers. And so he went and looked up how much this family had given. And the previous year they had given $500 to their church. And the year current, the one that they wrote this letter, they had given $0. And so he said that he wrote back to this person, thank you so much for your concern. We're going to send back your $500 from the year before. And if you send us anything else, we'll send it, make sure it gets back to you as well. And we invite you to find a different church, because we're going to continue to use the cheapest labor possible so that we can be the best stewards of God's gifts that is given to us. And it's somewhat crass, but I think, again, there's something about the way in which we refuse to talk about money and the sort of weird type of secrecy we have around it that actually enables and allows for our people to do exactly what we've been talking about. Have that sin of my money is between me and myself. And even if we want to say it's maybe between me and God, that might be a stretch. But it's this idea that it's mine, right? That I get to do with it what I want. And so just that idea of the individualized sin, it's all about me, and not thinking about the community too. So you think about in the church how it might be a stretch to say, to consider yourself as I'm only going to give what I want and not what my community needs, as a sin against the community. But I think there is a sense in which you could talk and use that kind of language too. So
yeah,
I don't know what that's worth, but that's what I'll say there.
Yeah, and I would
give it back
only
to you.
add to. I would come alongside that only and say, A couple things. First of all, I'll pick on the Bitcoin world. So the Bitcoin world has this phrase: "Fix the money, fix the world." We've on this show before said hogwash, right? Hogwash. That is too high of a view for what a tool, an invention of a man, can overcome in regards to the problem at the very center and heart of man, which is I'm a rebellious son of a gun, as were my parents before me, all the way back to Adam and Eve. The good I know I should do, I do not do. The bad I know I should not do, I find myself neck deep in. Who will rescue me from this body of death? Christ Jesus our Lord will and does, right? And that rescue is one of um, granting, imputing, giving to me and to others his righteousness that I do not deserve by way of his own death. And then in the resurrection, saying, "It was paid, and I'm not alive now again in revenge, but I'm alive now." And he says, "Peace be with you. Follow me. Welcome to my kingdom." So all of this is going on in the Christian life. That fix the heart of man, right? Cover over the sin of man, and all is fixed. So this Bitcoin or fix the money, fix the world says too much, over promises by far. We do believe, I know on this show, better money for a better world, right? But I can say this: you might not be there yet, listener, or maybe you're wrestling with that. I think for me, back to this idea of having pastoral concerns for our neighbors and the like, I just would love it if actual pastors and theologians and leaders, which is to say everybody, and all who steward the lives of other people, all of us, if we would actually hit the pause button on life and make some space, take some time to contemplate what's happening with money, to look at the biblical categories and realize this. And maybe I'll try a new phrase. You'll fix the phrase, maybe make it better, but something like this: sick money for a sicker world still, right? the, it's bad enough in this world that I bring my sin to bear, right? It's bad enough that we're all sinners here. I can live a whole day with my family where there is an economy, there is an exchange back and forth of serving without actual money. But we know once we get out into groups of people larger than the family, larger than a few families, we know this. It's a sociological category and fact and reality that monetary systems then grow up. And God seems to suggest that he is very concerned with whether these are sick or healthy systems. It's bad enough that we're wrestling with our sin and we can't overcome it on our own. God went so far as to send his only son to overcome that. Not just to send him, but to go and die in our place. But whether we look at how bad our sin is or how great his victory is, in between though is a lot of daily life, a lot of daily considerations. And we would do well. That's where I'm at today. We would do well to contemplate the financial system we're in. I think of, I'll just say this and then I'll be done. Whether as an individual citizen, I almost went to a school board meeting 2 nights ago, almost decided not to this time, and it's all right, decided not to. Or pastors sometimes speak up to their local government. As a pastor, I once in Michigan went to Lansing and spoke in an open hearing on a particular matter. Like sometimes as pastors, because we have people in our care, we will go, quote unquote, speak to power, right? We have to do it well. We have to do it winsomely. We have to do it respectfully. But anytime we're in care of other people, we'll go speak to power. Has it ever occurred to us as husbands, as parents, and as pastors, as leaders, has it ever occurred to us to speak to power, Jared, as concerns money? And I'm thinking the answer is largely no. And so if this kind of conversation can, in me and us, but maybe in some of our hearers, get people thinking in those terms, I think it could be profitable. I think it could be profitable.
And in some ways, what you're saying is we are to advocate for those we love, and perhaps even for those who don't understand that they're in a system that is not working for them.
Mm-hmm.
And in many ways, we say we have the Holy Spirit, we have the advocate who intercedes for us between us and the Father in prayer constantly, and we get to embody that as we do this sort of thing, which I think is a beautiful way to close our time together today. So hope that you've enjoyed this one as we've explored what it might mean that we have not just individual sins when we think about money, but that as a community and perhaps as a government, if you will, that we use this in a way that God does not, but that there is hope always, only, of course, because of Jesus, but there's hope also for better days, for better money, for a better world. David, I think you said that really well when you did that. So you disagree with us, let us know. Write that you think we're a bunch of heretical, going to go to hell in a handbasket people. We'd love to hear that. But if you think it's great too and you'd love to speak with us, send us an email. The link's down in the description that way, or leave us a comment wherever you're watching this. But we'll see you next time as we gather to talk about our love for Jesus and for Bitcoin too. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.